Okay, a couple of quick announcements, and then we plan to have a little bit of an open mic night, but hopefully in about 10 minutes or so, we're going to be joined by Councilwoman Nora, I'm sorry. And I won't even attempt to pronounce her last name, so that's the first order of business that we'll have when she joins us, is to get the correct pronunciation there. And she's going to be joining us to talk a little bit about the second announcement you see here, the Manresa Neighborhood Coalition, which is a group that is done extensive research into what the potential concerns are should the DOT and the Walk Bridge project opt to use Manresa Island as a construction staging point for the new walk bridge. So Nora will be joining us and giving everyone a brief update on that. Everyone is on the email list, and so you'll see from the email we sent last night that we did post the email from Manresa Neighborhood Coalition, and the links to all of their documentation is there. And they're urging folks to read it and understand the possible implications for East Norwalk residents, especially noise related, and urging people to be vocal in terms of writing letters, and I think possibly the ability to speak at a public hearing on, I think it's this Wednesday. And then also today I sent out an addendum to our email blast, just letting everyone know that the Wells Fargo bank branch here in East Norwalk on Cemetery Street has officially announced they'll be permanently closing, and that closing will be in May of this year. I believe the date is May 4th. So we can talk a little bit more about that, what concerns people have, and bring you up to date a little bit regarding the proposed future proposed development that's going to be there. And just as a heads up, the city is continuing with a number of studies and plans. I'm sure I haven't listed all of them here, but you'll want to follow those on the city's planning website called tomorrow.norwalkcp.org, and participate in as many of these as you can in terms of providing feedback. The waterfront industrial parcels that reside in 06855 are up for review for rezoning for different uses. So we urge you to take a look at what they've published on that, their recommendations in the interactive map that you can look at. And we hope to have the senior planner, Laura Kenny, the Norwalk senior planner from P&Z, join us at our March meeting as our guest to walk us through a lot of the details on that study. And then for tonight, like I said, we're going to have a bit of an open mic night and really make this a residents meeting. And if we have time, we'll talk about some old business, which is really just related to the future of ENNA, and get some feedback since our last meeting. We asked everyone to consider what you really want ENNA to look like and what role you think we should play. And maybe we can get some feedback on that from since the last meeting there. So at this time, I will, I guess we've officially opened the meeting. My name is Diane Cece. I'm the president of the East Norwalk Neighborhood Association. And tonight we also have board members Mary Ann Johansson, George Hensinger, and Sarah Hunter with us. And anybody else hops on, I'll let you know that as well. And at this time, what we'd like to do is go ahead and ask people to raise their hands. And if there's someone who has a question or a concern, a suggestion, any topic that you'd like to discuss, then we can kind of go around the room here. We do ask that you at least initially keep your comments brief, just so that if more people want to participate, that we'll have enough time to do it. We do like to try to keep these meetings to around an hour or so when we can. And if there's not a whole lot of participation, you know, obviously we'll end it a little bit sooner. And folks can always email into us if you have a concern, or a suggestion or any topic you'd like us to look into. And while I'm on that, I'll just remind you that our email is info@eastnorwalk.org, and our website is eastnorwalk.org. So you can always visit us there as well. Okay, so let's see here. Jim, I see your hand up. I'm going to have you unmute.
Hi, Diane.
Hi, Jim. How are you?
Not bad.
Good.
Two questions. One, have we heard anything more on the Wells Fargo development? Other than we know it's owned by Descala Properties, and we know it's going to be rental. I think years ago, or a year or 2 years ago, I saw a draft of what it would look like facing Mill Pond. That's changed. I know there was issues with traffic flow and in and out, line of sight and all that. And then the second thing, of course, would be near to my heart, I guess, is right across the street, the Mason Lodge. Any development? The other day, I noticed that they cleaned out the old actors and actresses workshop, whether it was Masons or whatever. If there's any news on that, if someone bought the 4 acres or something that they were selling, or whatever, I don't know. So there's just those two parcels.
Sure. Okay. So while we're waiting for Nora to jump in, let me address both of those. So on the Wells Fargo parcel, we did have a presentation last year by Mr. Descala, who's the owner of the property and the prospective developer of it. It was just pending the final approvals of the East Norwalk Transit Oriented Development zoning and the corresponding regulation changes. Those were subsequently approved in December, and after the appropriate waiting period, an application there or anywhere in the new zone can actually start coming in. I believe it was as of mid-January. With the announcement of the closing of the bank that we just found out a couple of weeks ago through a letter, I reached back out to Mr. Descala, who I try to have regular communications with, and you all may recall that in his presentation to us and in conversations with me, the intent was to ultimately knock down the bank, which is oversized, and that his intent in speaking with the bank management was that he would then rebuild a smaller version of that bank at the opposite side, closer to Gregory Boulevard, but that the bank would stay there, and then the development of the high-end rental apartments would be built basically around, through that whole parcel there, but still providing access to Mill Pond. So Mr. Descala told me that he had been unaware until that letter went out, apparently, that the bank intended to close that branch effective May. And I guess we have to kind of take him at face value on that. But I was a little surprised because I had only talked to him 2 weeks before I received that letter. So I'm not quite sure where there's a disconnect there on their communication, but the intent of Wells Fargo is to close the branch entirely, and people would move their accounts over to their West Avenue branch. And so, and I see Nora's coming into the room now, so I'll address the Mason thing quick, and then we'll come over to Nora in just a moment. Welcome, Nora. We'll be introducing you in just a moment. So Jim, I'm also in the same conversation with Mr. Descala. He just one of the past two conversations, I asked him if he had any further plans that he could share with us in terms of what he would be submitting to the city as a development application for the units there. And he told me that it was very premature at this point, and that in his words, that he wasn't anywhere near having something that would be ready to be submitted as an actual development application with the city, and did promise to keep us informed as he went along. Hopefully, I'm hoping that what that means is that he will reach out to ENNA and start to share some of the more defined aspects of what he's thinking about before he puts the application into planning and zoning. And as far as the Mason's Lodge goes, I've been in communication with him too. The last information I had was that they were still moving the zoning change application through the process in planning and zoning. But it looked likely that the zone change they needed in order to be able to maximize a potential sale of the excess property there would go through. And the plan would still be what you all saw last year, which is to then have that money from the sale fund the complete renovation, almost complete renovations of the lodge itself, including the actors studio and theater that was there, Jim. And the idea also being that they would make the lodge more accessible to civic and social groups in terms of rental space for both meetings and for events as well. And so I think what you're seeing there with cleaning out and everything is probably in preparation of getting the approval for the zoning and then the permitting for actually doing the renovations and all the improvements inside the lodge. So hopefully that helped. Randa, I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce that. If you can just hang on a second, because we have a guest who's joining us tonight, who's going to bring us up to date on just what this issue is with the Manresa Island staging site for the walk bridge. Nora, I'm going to unmute you, and the first thing I'm going to do is say hi. I'm Diane Cece.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
And I would ask if you could, for my benefit and everyone else's, if you could pronounce your last name, because I didn't want to mispronounce that.
No worries. So I'm Nora Niedzielski-Eichner. In Polish, a DZ is a J sound, which makes it a little less manageable. It's the DZ that throws everybody.
Okay, perfect.
But I am also just Nora, is always fine.
Okay, and the and you represent what areas with the Common Council?
So I'm an at-large member of the Common Council, so I represent the entire city. But I am a resident of Village Creek, and so I'm here today in my Village Creek hat, really talking about Manresa.
Perfect, thank you. So we have a number of people on tonight, and I think that I had mentioned to you in an email that we did send out the email blast that came from Jennifer Butler. It went out last night. So for folks who, it was a late email, sorry about that. So for folks who haven't seen it, we sent it out around 8 o'clock last night, and it has a link within our email to the Manresa Neighborhood Coalition site, where all of their documentation and research and history and recommendations and the information on the upcoming public hearing this week is as well. So folks, after Nora gives us an update on this, please be sure to go to that link and or to Manresa Coalition, manresacoalition.org, I think is the site.
Manresa Neighborhood Coalition.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Nora. Okay.
Yeah, so I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all because I do think that what is being proposed for Manresa is likely to have an impact on East Norwalk, primarily on the waterfront, but obviously sound travels in as well. And I don't think that East Norwalk has been informed or consulted necessarily, not to the extent that the west side has been consulted, but we've been aware of and fighting about this for a couple of years now. So just to catch everyone up and make sure we're all on the same page. As you all know, the walk bridge is being rebuilt. And Initially they were planning on building the new bridge spans on Water Street, just south of Washington Avenue, for a lot of obvious reasons, not a great location. And they then decided about 2 years ago, give or take, year and a half ago, time it flies, that instead they were going to build the bridge spans on Manresa Island. So they are planning on eminent domaining, in essence, or eminent leasing, a portion of the Manresa site near where, if those of you who are familiar with it, near where the dock is and the oil tanks. So on the east side, facing East Norwalk across the harbor, and they are planning on building the bridge spans there. They may also be demolishing some of the old spans there, although there is some, it's unclear what their plans are specifically in terms of demolition at this point. It seems to have changed a little bit over the last few months. But if you go to the Manresa Neighborhood Coalition website, we've tried to gather all of the information in one place to make it as easy as possible for folks to get up to speed. And you'll see, among other things, a noise study that they conducted at our request that shows you that the noise levels are going to be pretty intense. And this is a project that they say is going to last 5 years. But if you look at the application they have filed with Connecticut Deep, which is what the hearing is for on Wednesday, they're actually requesting a permit that would allow them to be there for up to 10 years. And the noise levels involved at the site itself will be 100 decibels, in some instances 90 decibels. I mean, they're going to be banging, compressors, driving, screws, enormous screws and bolts into, enormous pieces of steel. But that noise levels that travels out across the water is still going to hit Calf Pasture Beach, and somewhere in the 55 to 60 to 70 range, depending on the tool that they're using. And you won't see those numbers for Calf Pasture Beach because they did no hearing studies for the east side. They only did the noise studies for the west side, but you can extrapolate from their methodology because it explains, there's a calculation for a west side neighborhood that's approximately the same distance over water. So, from the East Norwalk perspective, I think it's really the noise that's going to be the largest issue. There's also tremendous potential impacts on the wildlife. As many of you know, Manresa, as it has been defunct, has become this amazing new sort of ground for ospreys and peregrine falcons and turtles to nest in. And we're emphasizing that issue in part because the application that is currently up is in front of DEEP. So one of their mandates is to be considering the impacts on wildlife. The other issue, quite frankly, which impacts all of East Norwalk, is that this is going to potentially substantially delay any actual resolution of the whole Manresa problem. So NRG, as some of you may know, has yet again put Manresa up for sale. They claim that they in fact have interested bidders. It's unclear whether that's true or not, but no one is necessarily going to be interested in doing this if DOT has rights to some portion of that property for up to 10 years. So, this decision to try to use the Manresa site is going to delay any resolution of that for, again, up to potentially 10 years, and also make it much harder for the city to be the sort of sole negotiator. Now instead of it being the city, NRG, the state, and maybe the feds, it's now the city, DOT, NRG, the state, the feds. It's really going to complicate a resolution there. So for all those reasons, and the most important thing to tell you, and you will see this on the Manresa Neighborhood Coalition website, we are not trying to reopen the entire walk bridge question. We understand that that is quite literally water under the bridge. And if the Manresa site was the only usable site, I think we might all sort of say, let's suck it up and deal with it. But we foiled documents related to some of our requests, our study requests, and what we discovered is that their DOT has identified at least 3 sites that are industrial sites that do nothing but major steel frame construction, including the site just south of Albany that built the Tappan Zee Bridge. So clearly qualified to do this kind of work. And DOT's own engineers doing this study of other alternate sites suggested in the report that it actually would be preferable to build the bridge someplace that one of these sites rather than Manresa. So our point is simply that they have an option that would not put the bridge in anyone's backyard. This is not a case of, I don't want it in my backyard. I don't want it in anyone's backyard. It shouldn't be on Water Street. It shouldn't be on Manresa. So we are really trying to ask people to come to the hearing if you can. It is on the 23rd at 3 p.m. It'll be via Zoom. You can register and get the link. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Alternately, or in addition, you can send an email. And again, the information, you can click on a link on the Manresa Neighborhood Coalition website to send that email. And they're accepting those emails through February 28th at, I think, 5 p.m. So again, we really appreciate if East Norwalk voices get raised. I do think it's going to have an impact on all of you, and we want to make sure that you're informed and have the opportunity to participate. And I'm happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
Nora, thank you so much for that background and that information. And I know people will jump over to your site as well to really kind of sink their teeth into, all the details on this, especially the folks that'll be most impacted by noise. I would say, you can go ahead and raise your hand, but you can also send questions in through chat, and we'll grab some off of there. Nora, we really appreciate your time. I'm not sure if you have to scoot back to a caucus meeting, but while you're here,
yes.
If people have questions, and I see two that came in to me. I don't know if they're in the whole chat room, but someone wanted to point out that there's also deer and turkey on the Manresa property as well. And then the question came in is the sound any worse than dredging and pile driving that typically occurs in our area? And I think people are talking about the noise we already have, especially with the Walk Bridge project already on both sides of the river.
And I genuinely have no idea what the decibels are on pile driving, but you can, if you look at the sound study that's linked on the Manresa Coalition, Neighborhood Coalition website, if you all have information about the pile driving noise, you could do your own comparison, because I don't want to comment on something I'm just making numbers.
That's fair enough. And I think we somewhere ENNA has a decibel chart, so we can take a look to see if that's listed. I know some of them go up to like a jet coming like almost right over your house as well. And I think you had published something about the sound coming into half pasture would be equivalent to like running a vacuum right next to your head, at those decibels. I'm sorry if I missed what you said in terms of the timing on this, except it's alarming that, with all these DOT projects, they can go many years beyond what their estimates are. But so then is there plan suggesting that that they be working morning, noon, and night? So are we looking at evening and overnight and weekends and everything?
They are currently claiming that they will not be doing evenings, overnight, weekends. One of the problems, of course, is that there's no apparent enforcement mechanism. So that is a promise that is worth about as much as the piece of paper that it's written on, as far as I'm concerned. We all know what happens when deadlines get close. So
yeah,
that's
actually, we just sent out a notice for East Norwalk relative to the Walk Bridge project, because due to some deadline issues right now, instead of just continuing with their weekend closures, they now have had to add in a full week of closure 24/7 under the bridge the first week in March. So hopefully that doesn't happen again, but it does, as you know, wreak havoc over here. So you're right with those deadlines and everything. Okay, so does anyone have their hand raised up, or let me take a look here, see if I can see. Or if someone has a question for Nora or a comment, you can throw that into chat and we'll get that to her.
Awesome. And I'm going to pop back to caucus.
Okay.
But
Great.
I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
to speak to all of you. My email, Diane has my email. Feel free to give it out to anyone who wants it. Diane, I'm happy to chat more. My phone number too. Happy to talk to anyone, and I appreciate your interest.
Okay. Thank you so much, Nora. We appreciate it. If you get done there early, just feel free to come back in as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Early, not so good with the caucus, but if it says I'll pop over. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm sorry here, I'm looking all over my screen because I just don't have this organized well enough. So maybe Sarah, if you can help out here too. Does anybody have their hand raised that has a comment or a question?
I'm looking. I don't.
Okay, okay, well, while we're waiting on that, I did have another question come in to me on chat which is an update on what is going on under the railroad bridge on East Avenue. And I think we're finding too that you know, a lot of people haven't, you know, followed this in detail for all the years that this project has been developing. So I just want to give a brief background to say when you're looking at the East Avenue and the East Norwalk Railroad Bridge on East Avenue, there are actually 3 projects that kind of cross section there that originally were 3 separate projects. And so East Avenue and under the railroad bridge and the bridge itself are actually scheduled for years of reconstruction related to 3 different projects. The first project is the original project, which was the Metro North project that happened throughout Fairfield County and the New Haven line of the railroad to replace all of their catenary lines on the line. So this was not just related to East Norwalk, but it came all the way from Greenwich and then all the way up the line. So, and that required also redoing the bridge in terms of the height. Around the same time as that, the city of Norwalk started to pursue an opportunity to do what they call the East Avenue Improvement Project. And that project consists of basically widening and lowering East Avenue with the goal of improving the lanes for traffic, eliminating what we call the slalom course, where you switch from left to right to left as you approach the railroad bridge going south. And as a part of that, and in conjunction with Metro North Railroad and the DOT, to actually lower the roadway considerably in order to allow trucks to go under. Tractor trailers actually would be able to fit under there. The third component of it is when the state decided to made the decision to go ahead and replace the walk bridge versus the other alternatives. They then linked the East Avenue projects in with the walk bridge project so that everything is managed as one major project with the DOT so that they can coordinate all of the bridge replacements and the road work that have to be done in order to replace the walk bridge, which is the project that Nora was just speaking about. Ultimately, there'll be additional lanes on East Avenue, and in line with redoing the entire railroad bridge and adding an additional lane there, there'll also be improvements to access to the railroad for commuters, and all of the functionality with the walkway underneath the railroad bridge will also be remedied. So there'll be sidewalks and protected area where people can walk under the bridge on both sides and also have access to both sides of the platform as well. And I believe that I saw actually just recently, I'm not sure if this was part of the original project or not, but also to have to redo the East Norwalk train station and to have some sort of like a retail operation there for newspapers or coffee, etc. And not sure how that links in on the other side of East Avenue at the railroad station, because the project that went in next to the as part of the old hat factory next to the Pooch Hotel, where the Brim and Crown development of apartments are, that developer's plan had promised to do a small structure as you turn into the railroad station from East Avenue across from Mobile, and have a 2-story structure there that would have a little coffee shop and newspapers and things like that on the bottom floor. But we haven't seen anything over there in terms of breaking ground. And we're certainly hopeful that that doesn't get pulled out of their plan. So that's a 101 on what's going on over there, but there's a lot more information. And if you go to our website, eastnorwalk.org, you can link on to some more information there as well. And you can email us and we can send you more information. Okay, and then Rhonda is writing in, of course, that the lowering is a problem because of flooding. And I'll just answer that by saying that before they decided that they were going to do the lowering, they had massive amount of engineering studies to determine how they could fix the flooding, which obviously needed to be fixed there anyway, and whether or not they could do this from an engineering point of view to be able to accommodate the water. And so they have designed their plans and engineered their plans to be able to remedy that situation there. I think it has to do with pumping and the way that the water goes out to Fort Point as well. So what people may not know too is that it looks likely that all the approvals either have gone through or will go through shortly to realign Fort Point Street with the entrance to the train station to go to the southbound side of the train station. So where you now go up that steep hill that's across from the parking lot on East Avenue, the city is working with the 3rd Taxing District to reconstruct everything over there so that you would actually have a ramp that goes up kind of, I guess, in front of the existing White House that the 3rd Taxing District owns, but that driveway then would then line up with Fort Point Street so that theoretically you could just cross Fort Point Street going to and from that entrance to the southbound Metro North train station. And another thing people may not know is that in conjunction with this project, there will be a traffic light installed at Fort Point. There was some talk about installing the light there and then subsequently removing the light at Myrtle, just so that for better traffic flow. But as far as I know right now, both lights are still in the plan. This is really your meeting, everyone. I see a lot of regulars on here. I know who have been following things. If you're just hopping on to get updates, that's great. But if you have some particular concerns or anything new in the neighborhood that you'd like to talk about or ask about, we'll do our best to provide some information there.
Randa's hand is up again.
Okay,
I think.
thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it Randa? Is that how you pronounce your name?
Yes, it's Randa.
During our East Norwalk meeting where they were talking about zoning the East Norwalk corridor, and we spoke about 1.3 parking spaces per dwelling and that sort of thing. At the next opportunity, with regards to the congestion, I would love to see us counter offer with like 1.6 cars per dwelling with all of the rehabs, because it's just unrealistic. So if one person has a company, everybody's parked and piled on the street. But the concern I have is with the very end of the meeting, when all of the back and forth had occurred, they said that they were removing the 10,000 square foot maximum size. That was discussed earlier in the meeting as being about the size of Rite Aid. And then they went on to talk back and forth about parking. And then all of a sudden at the very end, they said, okay, we may as well just remove the maximum square footage. And I just don't know where that came from based on the whole preceding meeting. So maybe I missed something and you could explain that part to me.
Yeah, that actual whole debate was very interesting. And I'll repost it again just so that people can watch it, because the really interesting thing is the discussion around those sizes that took place at the planning and zoning meeting itself with the commissioners. And
Yes.
so as you watch them kind of go back and forth and talk about square footage sizes for parcels and then uses, you'll see that it was just a very arbitrary numbers that people were throwing out, not really understanding what the size of those structures and uses could end up being. In fact, I think one of the commissioners actually even said, this is like throwing, the darts at a board to just try to pick a number out of thin air, which was extremely concerning. So ENNA had earlier than those final meetings had submitted in suggestions that we thought would limit the size of different types of uses, but not be so restrictive as to not be able to have the types of businesses that we might want in the corridor to come in. And so the topic around the 10,000 square foot was actually a few different things. One had to do with the actual size of a lot as being a minimum of 10,000 square feet. But I think what you're talking about, Randa, is what they were talking about in terms of the size of retail. And so the commissioners, despite the commissioners and ENNA asking staff to provide them with a number of visual examples of, 5,000 square feet, 10,000, 25,000, which staff never did, they were struggling to try to understand the size of something. Steve Kleppen, I think at one point had suggested Rite Aid was one of the ones that were around 10,000, and that's actually 25,000, et cetera. So what ended up happening then is they went back and they settled on whatever the final square footage was, with a maximum without a special permit. I think the maximum went up to 25,000 without a special permit. And then anything over that would require the special permit, or they may have cut it back to 10. I actually have to check the notes on that. At the very end of their conversation, it occurred to all of them that what they were talking about was strictly retail type of commercial operations, and that they hadn't set minimums and maximums that would relate to food type of operations. So there's still some concern over that because it didn't seem that there was any maximum that would be set for that. And one of the things that we were guarding against is getting huge, like a restaurant that's a national chain that takes up a huge footprint and then requires a ton of parking, and then maybe even on top of that to have some sort of like a drive-through operation. So what I can do, Randa, is I just can't recall all these numbers off the top of my head, but what I'm happy to do is post and put it in the next email so that people can see what the actual final language was that was decided upon. And I can say, though, that there is little or no opportunity to change those regulations at this point. I'm not saying it can't be done,
The
but it would
very
be
end,
very difficult.
right. At the very end, it just all of a sudden came out that that summary was, okay, so we're going to remove size restrictions. And it just, I have no idea, because we all listened, we all participated in the meeting and the preceding meetings, and we all had our moments. But at the very end, they just summarized it with saying, okay, we're going to remove the maximum square foot, and that just surprised me.
Yeah, and I think that sentence here that you're referring to did go back to when they all discovered that they hadn't actually imposed anything that had to do with food, and I think that that's where they took it out, because they still had a maximum that related to other commercial retail operations, and they set a maximum for both a regular application coming in as an as of right application versus an application that comes in as a special permit. And as I recall, obviously both of them still appear to be too large for what we would want to consider.
And I do agree, they did say they were going to not allow a drive-through facility. And
Yeah,
that's our
exactly.
question.
Yeah.
I'm a
And
little worried.
there's another interesting point on that too, Randa, is that you know, one of the things that we've learned in our research is that developers, when they're putting in these plans, if it's not already defined in this zone, they really can take the retail space that's at the bottom of a larger development, and they can carve out retail space that goes to the maximum size of usage. And then really what that does is it blocks any smaller operations from coming in, either a small operation, you know, that's like a local franchise or a mom and pop operation. And so their desire is to be able to rent spaces like that to large national operations, because one, they can afford it, and two, they tend to sign very long-term leases. And so they don't have the expense of a turnover of many smaller units, you know, say 5 smaller units versus 1 large one and 1 smaller one. And they don't have all the expense of, you know, having to rent that out all the time. And we did raise that as a point too, that we would want to guard against that happening, because part of the rationale for the folks who supported having some new development over here was to be able to get the types of businesses and services and amenities on those ground floors that we would like to see. And almost everyone agreed that that would be mostly not big national chains in East Norwalk.
I hear you. One of my concerns, is there anyone on the call from the Masonic Lodge property?
I don't think so. You can raise your hand if you're here, but I'm not seeing any names from.
Okay. My concern is that they kind of backhanded said during our last call that they would like to stay in East Norwalk. We know they're facing financial troubles. They pointed out during the meeting that they border the East Norwalk corridor. And if they border the East Norwalk corridor, and it sounded to me like, make me an offer. It worries me that that they will go relocate a half a mile away in an office building, and then we're going to get this maximum square foot thing that's going to come in on their property. And that would certainly change. They talked about themselves as being the jewel of the neighborhood, and that's only because of their open green space. And if that were to become developed, then it would certainly affect everybody's property values in the whole neighborhood. So I'd certainly not
Yeah,
like to see.
I think what you're referring to is the fact that the TOD rezoning actually cuts right across it. It actually ends right there at that line. And that's what made everyone nervous. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
With it, right, okay. Yeah, because at one point we even speculated, and I think we outright asked Michael Descala if he had eyes on that property so that he could extend the Wells Fargo parcel development across the street and buy up the open space that would be rezoned for the single family housing and the lodge itself. So I can only say that I'll continue to try to get updates on that, but I think Jim had pointed out before that he's already seen some activity there with them starting to clean out some stuff. And I guess I probably shouldn't have assumed that it was relative to or related to
that's another
the
thing.
renovations, but it'd be interesting.
If they're going to be so magnanimous and offer to open their lodge to other volunteer organizations to use the extra rooms in the facility, why haven't they?
Well, and that I can answer because I did a tour over there with the head of the lodge, whose name, I'm sorry, it escapes me. Another senior moment tonight. The facility itself doesn't lend itself to meetings. A room that would ultimately be used has a number of deficiencies and really needs to be redone.
Yes,
And there's a smaller room that they would open up right away, and they maybe perhaps even do. I'm not sure if any groups right now. But I don't believe that that is accessible. And so most groups only look to use properties that are ADA compliant. So the larger room that they would like to make available and also to do as rentals needs to be renovated because it's old, it has some deficiencies. It's not up to date in terms of plumbing and electrical. And their plans are to completely redo that large room and include a like a full kitchen there, staging that's adaptable, a brand new sound system, etc. So that's why, you know, my understanding that they don't do it now, although you know, they probably could. I mean, it's not, you know, terrible, but you know, what they really want to do is get everything fixed up and up to date on codes and safe and have good access coming in through the back over there directly into the meeting hall.
They had meetings there for quite some time. Okay, thank you. That helped a little.
Okay. Okay, so we are just about at 5 of 8. I'd like to hear from anyone who has questions, concerns, suggestions.
It's like Jim has a question.
Let me check the chat too, which I
Yeah,
forget to
I
do
put it
over
on the
here.
chat about the Strawberry Hill Bridge.
Okay.
Besides looking, say ridiculously high,
Mhm.
just looks stupid.
Mhm.
Pure language. I think of that house that's right there, right next to it, and the flooding and stuff and whatever issues that they have. Can you go over again what the purpose was to raise it that high?
Mhm.
And is there a plan? When are they going to finish? Continue help? I don't know. It's
Yeah.
just aggravating.
So the original project had to do with a couple of different things. One was the state DOT had determined that the bridge itself was a hazard from truck hits on I-95 in the right lane. So where trucks approach the embankment going under that bridge, the bridge was in a position that it could be struck. And apparently it had been in the past. And the other component in terms of raising it had to do with the water pipe that runs underneath the bridge. So they had to raise the bridge and relocate that pipe or do something that had to do with the water pipe. And then also to improve the bridge itself in terms of the lanes. And I use the word improve because that's what the DOT uses, but that of course is debatable. In terms of the lanes themselves and the sidewalks. But I think that the least amount, in the version that I saw, the least amount of improvement actually ends up being for pedestrians and biking and has more to do with lanes for cars and trucks and has to do with the trucks on the highway. It's a massive project. It's millions and millions of dollars and multi-year, as you already know. And ENNA, when we attended their public forum on it a few years back, questioned the overkill of the thing to, in fact, we asked them to provide us with the number of truck hits there. And I think as I recall, it may have just been 2 times a truck had struck the part of the bridge at the embankment there, like over 5 or 10 years. So we're kind of like, shouldn't you really just kind of manage the truck drivers instead of an $11 million project because, you know, someone might hit it? Maybe you have $100,000 fine for striking a bridge embankment, something. And then the issue with the water line too also seemed to be something that could have been managed better. And then of course was once they got started, one of the most disturbing factors was the clear cutting of all the trees there. So while they had basically touched on that in the public forum and talked about some of it, I don't think anyone, including all of us, had expected that they would take down all those trees, and the folks who live there, you know, and the houses right there just have, you know, no shade and no trees and just constant noise. And
Well, there was also discussion of making that a exit and entrance, because they actually did all 4 quadrants around that. Remember that?
Well,
That was
yeah, exactly. And,
because of the
that's
mall,
kind of
all
been
the
on
traffic from the mall, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And that's been like on the rumor mill for a long time in terms of alleviating East Avenue as well. But it really reared its ugly head again with the whole Norden debacle with the distribution center. In fact, I think somebody asked in chat if there's an update on Norden, so I'll touch on that quick too. But I think Strawberry Hill Bridge right now is already behind schedule, Jim. I have to go back and check the original dates and see if we can get a status from DOT on it. But I think at this point, I think they're already behind schedule. And I don't think they have a good track record on that right now, because honestly, I don't know if it's true or not, but in my own personal opinion, I don't think they've actually finished the Yankee Doodle Bridge. So if they think they're finished with it, I don't know what's going on with the whole center median there. And I don't understand why the northbound exit 16 exit still has people driving in the gutter, so to speak, where they, right there at the catch basins and everything, hugging the railings over there. So Norden is very interesting. So folks will remember that as all these studies were going on, when the TOD study first started, the Transit Oriented Development Study for East Norwalk, there was a intention by city staff and the TOD study committee, of which ENNA was a member, to not simply take a circle and go around the East Norwalk train station for a half a mile radius, which is the standard that the state uses for TOD funding, but rather to take a look at the map and decide where it made sense to look at development around the train station, but still kind of stay roughly within that half mile. And at first we looked at a shape that, for lack of a better term, it kind of looked like kidney shaped. And it did go up to Norden, because a lot of people thought that that's an underutilized and poorly utilized parcel right now, and could it be developed in a neighborhood friendly manner that would be kind of recognized as in keeping with TOD principles. But in the end, it was the circle that won out, and we couldn't really figure it out, except that, of course, not too long after that, the Norden application for the distribution center came in. That application ultimately was pulled. It never went to a vote with the zoning commission, so it wasn't denied. The applicant simply pulled the application, which means they can come back at any time and resubmit it. Last summer, they were about to resubmit an application where they were suggesting a number of other multiple types of units in there. And at the last minute, after some pushback again from us, and probably a lot of questions from city staff as well, we hope, they did not submit that application. So that never actually made it over the counter, as we say. The second interesting part about that is that as these studies are going on, when the TOD study was being bid out to consultants and worked on from the consultants in the study committee, a decision was made to take 2 parts of East Norwalk out of the TOD study and to fund separate studies for each one of them on their own. One of them is what's called the industrial waterfront land use study, and the other one is the Norden parcel study. Only one of them has been funded and is actually underway, and that's the industrial waterfront study. So as of right now, the city, the administration and staff haven't done anything in terms of looking at the Norden parcel to determine what would be some of the better uses and some development there that would be beneficial to the city, beneficial to the developers, and beneficial to the neighborhood and our community. So essentially what we have out there, I think it may have been Peter who asked the question, essentially what we have now is we're still almost in the same exact boat that we were when the Norden application first came in terms of some not so desirable uses possibly being up at Norden. And it's very concerning because ENNA made multiple requests to staff to go in and change the zoning regulation for that zone, which basically stands alone on its own. It's called the restricted industrial zone, so that they could eliminate uses like, helicopter landing pads and, car, automobile part storage and manufacturing and petroleum processing plants. And there's a list of I think 7 things that would be really horrendous over there. And of course, to make the move to pull out distribution and warehousing centers as well. Now, having said that, when people ask if there's any application, I will just remind people that when we go to planning and zoning and ask those questions, they can only share with us information on an application that's actually been submitted to the city. While they are in talks or working with or assisting developers who have an idea for a parcel but haven't yet submitted an application, the public is not privy to any of that information. And we can't even obtain that information by filing a Freedom of Information request to the city. So what ends up happening is, and what could be happening right now, is that city staff and the administration could be working hand in hand, even as we speak, with a potential buyer and developer of that parcel. And by the time we would publicly know about it, it would be literally almost literally would be at the stage where it would go onto the calendar for the zoning commission to start their review of the proposal. And for those of you who have been hanging around City Hall for a while and with ENNA, you'll know that it's not unusual for an application that's at that stage to actually already be a done deal. So that's kind of where we are. The last time I asked was probably a month or so ago, maybe in December. And at that time, there was nothing that planning and zoning could share with us in terms of that parcel. So I hope that answered the question. And then it looks like Judy wrote in about tax dollars not being used to fund a study for a private landowner. What that ends up really actually being, Judy, is that it's the study is really to determine possible zoning uses within the different zones in East Norwalk. It just so happens that through a series of zoning changes years ago, that particular parcel has its own zone called restricted industrial. But I do agree with you that that's a good way to look at it, that any subsequent study that does get funded would, actually be benefiting a private owner of the, there are multiple owners throughout the whole park, but it would be definitely benefiting one primary owner, the one that has the parcel and the structures that would have been the distribution and warehouse facility. One of the things that we should push for and that we should all hope for is that now that the TOD zoning has been enacted, it's conceivable, I think, as I said early on, that applications can start coming in almost, any minute now. And so the hope for ENNA and for all of us residents here would be that our planning and zoning staff would advise developers to reach out as early as possible to ENNA so that residents have an opportunity to see what their proposals are and to have input into what they'd like to do, both in terms of feedback on things that we wouldn't want to see and some of the things that we'd like to see in their developments. And what we've tried to do in the past is encourage planning and zoning to do that ahead of the application actually being filed. And we're often asked why we do that. And it's not just as asking for, the courtesy of them doing that for us, to meet with residents before they file. The big reason is that statutorily, once an application has been filed with planning and zoning, a time clock starts to tick under which the city must consider the application and ultimately rule on the application. That time clock and almost all the other ones that are regulated by state statute do not bode well for residents. None of them are on the side of residents. All of them are on the side of developers. So it's really important that we try to push to get whatever potential developers are coming in to try to meet with us, early enough that we can provide feedback and work with them and, hopefully not have these contentious, frustrating, time-consuming, angst-causing battles, come the time for public hearings. I think between now and our next meeting, there's going to be a whole lot of things going on in terms of East Norwalk and with the city itself. And I just want to apologize to the group too, been a little bit lax in pulling together the newsletters. The intent is for us to get something out with information that's timely and relevant, basically every Saturday, and have just fallen off of that schedule a bit and hope to get back on track. So want to thank everyone, and I don't see any other hands raised, and hopefully we answered your questions. Feel free to reach out to us at info@eastnorwalk.org. And on behalf of the board and everyone here, thank you all for coming tonight. And thanks for caring about East Norwalk and staying informed. And we'll talk to you soon.